Hi, I'm Christie Harkin. I'm the managing editor at Bitcoin Magazine. I've been there for 2 years off and on, and have been doing publishing and editing for about 20 years, but more recently to the space. Bitcoin Magazine is the oldest news source for the Bitcoin and blockchain community. We started in May 2012 as a print edition and then became an online edition. We also have the print publication of Why Bitcoin, which some of you may have seen at other conferences, and Distributed, which is a new publication that comes out a couple times a year. So that's us.
Hey everybody, Chris Snook. I am the managing partner of Launch House. We are a digital holding company family office based in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I also am the executive chairman of World Tokenomic Forum, which is a think tank, industry agnostic, kind of think the Davos of crypto. And then I write a column for Inc. magazine, four posts a month.
Go ahead. Okay, so I'll make it really brief, and we can jump to the ideas. I'm Jee Abbey Lee. I've been a reporter for a while covering Korea, and I recently left a month ago to start my own company called Crypto Korea. It's 2 C's. And I will be mainly talking about the cryptocurrency in both Korea. So it's not just South Korea's exchanges and regulations, but also North Korea and their efforts to mine cryptocurrency and also hack into the exchanges around the world. I think you should really follow it because what happens in both Koreas really affect the market. As you know, Bitcoin prices fell like 20% when South Korea announced that it will ban cryptocurrency in the country altogether. I don't think that will happen, but since South Korea is very advanced in terms of digital currency, I think it might be interesting for you to follow. And I haven't launched it yet, but it will be launched sometime this month. So yeah. I'll keep that brief and give it to Camila.
I've been at Bloomberg for 7 years covering markets. I covered bonds and FX in Argentina, stocks in Madrid. I moved to New York after that and started covering cryptocurrencies there as well as emerging markets.
Hello everyone, I am Toni Casserly. I am the co-founder of Cointelegraph Media Group and Network. And I am also the founder of Culture, which is the effort I've been working on for about the last 5 years to help create new forms of sovereignty and empower virtual nation construction for the most oppressed populations on the planet.
Ismail Malik, early adopter cryptocurrency, founded the first blockchain lab. Recently, as of sort of about 12 months, set up the ICO crowd network, and now we're a print and a digital publication. We largely look at tokenizing existing industries and verticals outside of the mainstream and try to cover the edge of the sort of industry.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Merten. I run the largest YouTube channel in the cryptocurrency space called DataDash. My main objective as an individual is to continue contributing to the space of cryptocurrencies and blockchain. It was the first technology that actually brought a sense of positivity, I think, into the finance space for hundreds of years, and it's now allowing to bring a huge power shift into the space of everyday life and a lot of the different industries that I think we can't even permit yet. So my main objective is to look at trading, investing, and value fundamentals in the market of cryptocurrencies and blockchain, and I hope to be a positive contributor through my own integrity on the channel.
All right, so I think it's safe to say that covering cryptocurrencies is different than covering anything else. I've seen it covering markets. I mean, first of all, it's a 24/7 market, doesn't stop at all. Prices move all the time. So that's one big change I had to come across with in my reporting. And it's just so volatile. The news flow is so intense. So I'm interested to hear everyone's opinion on how you think cryptocurrency coverage has kind of forced us to evolve in our own reporting. Who wants to start?
Something that's more interesting for me to think about is actually how can we use cryptocurrency to change the incentives of the media business as a whole? Because they're broken and completely perverse. The idea that most of the information we consume is controlled by less people than are actually in this room is absolutely absurd. The idea that the way most information is written is through individual purchases or through political game playing is also absurd and unethical. So in my mind, it's how do we actually use not only cryptocurrency, but blockchain technology in general to re-empower the incentives of the media industry as a whole, to actually protect things like whistleblower privacy using cryptography, to re-incentivize not merely marketplaces of information, which is what we have now, effectively purchasing an ad, right? And telling people that's the truth. But how do we actually use blockchain technology to incentivize a fundamental shift in how we value real, meaningful truth? And I believe the way we arrive at that point is both through empowering people who are risking their lives to tell the truth, to have a voice that's not going to threaten the very foundation of their existence, while simultaneously crowd and open sourcing the incentives in media. So if you are a journalist and you write a story, that the people who comment on that piece are actually incentivized both to state their opinion in a debate, back that up with facts, and that we're actually incentivizing people from completely different perspectives and completely different backgrounds to work together to create a more objective perspective on what is really true. And unless we're using blockchain technology to shift the incentives at the foundation of our industry, I think we're missing the point.
Okay. So who can elaborate on that? Like maybe how exactly can blockchain help us do that? For example.
So I think you know we answered an important question. We asked a different one, and so I'll try and tie the two together, because I think from our perspective at World Tokenomic Forum, what we realize is that not just media, finance, all these different industries where we're disintermediating them with blockchain have this chicken and the egg problem, right? And the chicken and the egg problem is what Toni was just talking about, which is how can we actually democratize or improve the state of this industry, call it media, and at the same time, a lot of you are here going, how do I get my company on Cointelegraph or Inc. magazine so I can fill my ICO subscription? And so you have these polar, you have this like, I have to play on this field that I'm currently in, this arena that I'm currently in. I have to know how to maximize my opportunity there. At the same time, I don't want to cause more of the same problem that you're speaking to, right? And so, so I think this is an important debate to have. I'll speak to the other side of it, which is how do you benefit right now and at the same time not compound the problem that we have, which is, you know, a pay-per-click model that obviously doesn't work and it is centralized. And so I think what that is be newsworthy. Try and solve problems in a way that is in your industry and in your sweet spot, and then provide journalists that are in a certain machine and trying to bridge to what the ideal version of that might be, provide them something that makes it newsworthy so that we can all trust at whatever level we can, there's some single source of truth around this company, this technology being actually credible, and not just some puff piece that was hemorrhaged or paid for through some menagerie of, you know, you write for me on Inc. and I write for you on Bloomberg and no one will know, and all that crap that goes on, so that as readers we can actually understand maybe what's really happening and have some trust in it. And at the same time, as entrepreneurs, we can effectively guerrilla market ourselves and go get our companies to the next level.
Or you can completely disrupt the model, right?
Yeah.
So you can just, like us, the ICO crowd, we say, right, our entire model is based on tokens. We don't take any fees, we don't have any, whatever. If the article is good and we see some merit in it, we want tokens in that project.
Right.
So we completely align with the project, and we're actually seeing that model evolve and work, and we're seeing bloggers and those who then pick up on our stories follow that. So, you know, we do not have to take any segment of the existing Murdoch empire in sort of the framework of what we lie, right? So, if we're only going to value the article we publish, those tokens are only going to have any substantial value if the project has merit, right? So, you know, it's no use. The incentives are completely aligned. We are actually got a very sort of a good equilibrium on why to accept tokens. If you accept tokens and there's no longevity and the value of those tokens, you've kind of lost any value in publishing that. And so blockchain 3.0 and the sort of whole new sort of escrow decentralized exchange model, you can start to put some sort of smart contract, autonomous layer on there that can start to evolve and drop and airdrop and give you tokens based on, so you're not able to sort of dump those tokens if you fall out with that project, etc. So we're starting to see a whole new, completely disruptive model on how actual media works. And I don't think, the syndrome where Bloomberg covers cryptocurrencies more than any other topic, or on any of these major publications, is they're actually losing the hold, right? The audience is not going to traditional media any longer, right? So yeah, you're going to start to see decentralized YouTube. You're going to start to see in these entire models that are going to start to employ the token economy at their bedrock.
That's actually starting in many ways. There are platforms out there now that people can publish to. I mean, there's Medium, obviously, but that's not quite the same. But I mean, look at something like what Brave is doing with their with their basic attention token. Look at what Poet is doing with their smart contracts for licensing content, where you can put something up on Bitcoin Magazine, for example, but somebody could license it and have it somewhere else, or you could post it on Medium and somebody could license it through a smart token that way, or a smart contract through a token that way. So there are all kinds of efforts and projects out there that are trying to allow content providers to put their work out there, be rewarded for it, and readers can, in some cases, depending on the platform, get rewarded for reading it or watching it or sharing it. But I think that this is something we're starting to see. The important thing is that readers, the responsibility gets shifted onto the readers to have their own critical thinking brought into play to make sure that, because if somebody puts something out there, chances are, you don't know if it's been fact-checked, you don't know if it's been edited, you don't know what the bias is, you don't know where anything is coming from. You have to be hypercritical as a reader. So just like being your own bank with Bitcoin brings great responsibility, holding onto your private keys, if you are going to be your own curator of content, you have that responsibility of really researching and knowing that what you're reading is real.
I tend to agree with you. I think what's important is, although I'm having my own business, at the core of my business has to be my integrity as a journalist. So you can bring in new platforms to introduce new ideas, whether it's YouTube or a blog, but the content has to be as if I'm still reporting for BBC. I'm still going to cross-check. A famous BBC reporter said, BBC pays me to not have an opinion. And I totally agree with that. I am not writing to expound my beliefs. No one cares about what Jee Abbey Lee thinks about Bitcoin. What you want to know is what's actually happening out there, and you want to make your own decision. And I think a lot of the bloggers nowadays are a little bit struggling with, because they try to be columnists / opinion leaders / Bitcoin users, and I don't think that's what the audience wants. I think what they want is accurate and vetted information, and not somebody's opinion. And I think Camila and I were actually talking about that a little bit, where we get a lot of content that's sponsored, and the readers are not sure whether that's information they could trust.
Yeah, I think that's a big problem in cryptocurrency reporting, that there's a fine line between reporting on an ICO, for example, or on a team that you're interested in, that you think can actually, that you think is actually news, and falling into kind of the PR trap. And it's hard. Like we were all talking about the amount of pitches that we get in our inboxes every day. I'm sure that's true for everyone. And so that's a big challenge for us reporters covering the space. I mean, just having a big filter, being able to choose the right projects. I mean, who to pay attention to, and definitely I think when we're talking about maybe taking tokens of the ICOs, I mean, that's also a very delicate, dangerous line to cross. I mean, I think that really, that's a huge conflict of interest there. So, yeah.
I think it's extremely important to keep in mind, going back to kind of the first general topic of discussion, in regards to using blockchain technology for media. I don't know if that's going to be something in the future in regards to building more trust. But I have to say that in the sense of decentralization, media is already becoming decentralized. It doesn't need, I think, any additional technology. We have the internet, we have social media, and I have to say that some of us are really living proof of that. I created a YouTube channel 6 months ago in July, and out of nowhere, we grew one of the largest audiences in the world. Now, I'm no Albert Einstein of finance, but what people really picked up on is that when there's a lot of YouTubers in the space who are covering media in regards to cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, but you can easily shift out two serious categories: people who are looking for the short-term gain of this whole movement. So you have people who are receiving tokens, who are obviously doing paid reviews of some sort, and then you have those who really genuinely can show it through their body language and then through the facts and evidence that they show that they care about the long-term movement. And their channels and foundations are not only built off of their intellect on the space, but it's based around integrity. If we think about it, communication in general is based around integrity, trust over a long-term period. And if we have people who are chasing the short-term in media, it's pretty easy to shift through them pretty quick. There are a lot of people who promote failing projects continuously, and you saw recently, putting it in relation to something that I think we can all see in crypto space, there was BitConnect recently. Who here knows about BitConnect? Yes, it was quite a wild storm, but I think many of us could detect it early on. But there was a lot of people who did fall for BitConnect, and it's a very sad story. Many people lost their life savings. The people who promoted that for weeks on end or months on end, taking in referral links, well, they're gone now. They're going to slowly die off. They're not going to be in it for the long-term game. So just like any other market of media, it's based around integrity. And I think that that integrity itself solidifies the trust factor. So again, my personal opinion is that the media is already being distributed. It's already being decentralized to a degree. We don't need any abstract technology. Communication itself will always be based around a sense of integrity. And through that comes fact-checking. Through that comes mistakes that people make. And when people make mistakes, they need to be transparent, correct them. And if they make too many, people start to lose that trust factor. So maybe a little bit of a simplified view, but I can tell you from experience, when you're transparent and when you admit to when you don't know something, or if you're, again, still open to learning more rather than just, saying, oh, well, I know about this technology, you're talking on it. Again, it's very important to have that integrity factor, and that'll get you so much further in the space in the long term.
Great. Okay, so we've mentioned blogs and YouTube. Interested to know your thoughts on what media is the most effective in telling cryptocurrency stories, or which stories are better in which media platforms?
So when we went to publication, obviously you produce a digital PDF version, and that went out, and we said, no, we want to do print first, right? And everyone was like, okay, well, we're in some sort of new digital utopia, and everyone reads everything digitally, and we don't have coffee tables anymore. But what we found is, human beings do live an offline lifestyle, right? And they do want to sit down and absorb in their own time on their train journeys. And we get a 10x more attention span and time spent reading on our print than we do on our digital, right? So, there's this dichotomy that the old ways of transmitting and relating information, because often we have reader groups around the print publication who then sort of story tell that ICO, right? So you have these old narratives, and we're not going to stop telling stories and sort of explaining these new products, because all of a sudden we've become sort of digital autonomous beings. So there is a danger that we sort of take the lexicon of the blockchain and we're trying to kind of superimpose it on ourselves. And reality is people like to sort of read through it. They can make their own minds up, right? So this whole idea that human beings need to be told this is genuine, this is this, this whole telling is what this revolution's against, right? We can make our own minds, we can read what we want, we can sort of go where we want, I can swap my Ethereum token for whatever I please, right? So the disruption is in us going against the entire old cultural order, right? It's a far deeper disruption. This is just the sort of icing on the cake where we're seeing sort of Steam and various other sort of engines emerge, but much deeper there is the whole cultural disruption on how we choose, what we choose, and why we choose it.
So the medium, I don't know if anyone in here knows Marshall McLuhan, but he is famous for saying the medium is the message. I would actually say he is one of the most prescient, transcendent philosophers we have ever had in human history. And the medium of blockchain media is not print, it's not digital, it's not video, it's not YouTube. The medium is economics, plain and simple. So that is what we have to think about changing in terms of the way we engage our readers now. Will we still see media live and thrive in print and in digital and in video and in experiential and all forms of real world content? Absolutely. But the medium of this industry, the medium of new media, is fundamentally economics. And so that is actually the tool that I think we should all be looking to play at. But the more important question is toward what end? Because if the end of your economic game is merely homogenizing the attention of an innocent population, then we as a human race and as a humanity have lost. People need to go outside, they need to play with their kids. Yes, they need access to the truth. But we really have to think about when we are designing these systems, how are we designing them to benefit human happiness and human life?
So I think economics definitely has to back every single story. Yeah. I think our stories need to be backed by data. I mean, that's kind of the foundation Bloomberg was built on top, so it's kind of drilled in my brain. All the stories need to be based on hard data, economics. But I think I think that the way we tell it is important. I mean, especially in a community that thrives so much online through memes on Twitter. I think that the medium is the message, and I think it's important how we tell those stories. And I think some stories lend themselves better on some media than others. Like a straight news story on South Korea banning ICOs. Maybe it's just great to see three straightforward graphs on that. People read it, get the message, and that's it. Maybe I want to write a feature on an awesome woman in a developer, and maybe that's a better story to tell on a magazine that people can browse through, look at the pictures, look at the gloss, and all of that. Maybe a YouTube video is great for explaining like how blockchain works or something. Yeah.
So I'd like to build on that because I'm a pragmatist, right? I'm not a futurist at all. If I was building a strategy right now to build on this, I would understand the underlying economics, and I would assume in this room primarily we're made up of entrepreneurs and investors that are hoping not to lose their ass, pardon my French, in crypto. And so I would build a strategy or understand that there's three ways into anyone's subconscious, which means you have their attention. You can shock them, you can fascinate them, or you can get their agreement. And so if I was looking at this panel, right, I would see opportunities in mediums, building on Tony's point, where I could fascinate people, right? And that's more the op-ed type stuff, where I could gain agreement, which is the YouTube edutainment blogger type stuff, right? Because we like people like ourselves, right? So I would have a comm strategy around how I'm going to edutain and what platforms could I put myself in front of where I'm going to endear myself to a known segment that likes DataDash because they represent someone I want to get agreement from, right? Or World Tokenomic Forum because they represent people that are crypto corporate types and blockchain DLT types inside of enterprise trying to figure out how they're not going to get disrupted and who they should invest in on the emerging tech side. And so I'm going to go solve their problem. And I would have a communication strategy for each one of these things. And then I would have one that's like edgy and that's like pisses people off and that is, you know, maybe not the one that your PR person is comfortable with you being on because you're going to shock people and that means you're going to Donald Trump them and you're going to get their attention whether you want it or not. And I would have my mix based on my culture and my purpose of what medium I'm going to put what message through, but I would have it all, and I would just rotate shock, fascination, agreement, shock, fascination, agreement. And then what I would try and build, which is the real thing, is a company that actually does something worth doing so that I'm newsworthy for the BBCs of the world, for the Bloombergs of the world, where they don't have to have an opinion because my stuff just kicks ass. That's my answer.
So going back to the original question, I think, how many of you follow Reddit for your cryptocurrency news? Yeah, for me too, like if I see it in traditional news media, I'm like, this is too late already. So I think for, especially, except Bloomberg for Camila's stories, but for me, I find that the traditional media is having a hard time following the breaking news. So even for BBC website, even if it's not just cryptocurrency, say like maybe US policy toward Iraq, what gets the most number of hits is a breaking news that's maybe like 200 words long, or a very analytical piece that's like 900 words long. So I think the different platform works definitely differently for different types of stories, and I think what the traditional media should focus on is the analytical and really vetted stories, as opposed to maybe bloggers or more new media types where they can, because of traditional media, we have to go through a lot of vetting process. You have to pitch your story, you have to write it, you have to go through multiple editors. So it's not really fit for breaking news. Yeah.
And that's something that I actually struggled with at a former publication I worked with, because I would get these companies who would be all over there like, oh, you've got to cover my company or cover my announcement. But then they would put their raw press release on Reddit and be their own news. And I'm like, oh, okay, you're already front paging your own PR on Reddit. I have no incentive now to write that story because you've already told everybody, and I will move on to something else now. And that was a message that I've been trying to get out to people.
So build on that more, because that's basically, I was getting at know your audience. You have a couple audience. You have the end user audience, which you want to get in front of because they're your customer, your investor, but then you have the audience of journalists. Like, don't disincent you by stealing your thunder, thinking that you're somehow hacking the machine, right? I mean, now you've totally taken Bitcoin Magazine's reason to care about you away.
Unless we decide to eventually, and eventually I moved on to Bitcoin Magazine, and we just really don't do a lot of breaking news.
Sorry,
No, but this is a point that, like, what we do is exactly that, the analytical piece. Right. We'll let other people break it, fine, whatever, but we'll be the ones who, 2 days later have gone and gotten the interviews and done a bunch of fact checking and done some copy editing, hopefully that there are no typos, that sort of thing, and then put out a polished piece. And we also look for not just A is happening. We look for a story. And this is something, this is a word that people have been using in this panel a lot as a matter of fact, a matter of course. So of course it's a story, right? It's a news story. It's a story. And we're all storytellers. Being human, part of being human is being a storyteller. So when you're pitching me your story, you have to let me know why it's a story and why anybody's gonna care. Because honestly, the fact that your ICO is coming out on Thursday, not a story, okay? I have an inbox full of ICOs coming out on Thursday. Tell me why I should care about yours, and tell me why you're the first person who's done it. And honestly, make sure you are the first person who's done it, and you're not the 5th person today that I've read about who's doing it, because I get that a lot. Do your research, pitch it to the right magazine or news site or blogger, or there are some fantastic interview sites in the space. There are some really good interviewers like Epicenter. They do amazing interviews. And of course, I'm blanking.
I'm sure this has only happened to you, and probably never happened to you, but people don't read your other columns, right? Like, it amazes me how many people pitch a story, whether it's to Inc., which I write, kind of on my own, I don't get paid to do it, or to you guys, where they've never read any of my other stuff, and they pitch me something I wrote about 3 times ago.
Yeah.
Right, and it's so easy to find someone's Twitter handle, but it's like I can understand what Camila cares about by reading your last 15 blogs, or your last whatever your story is, right?
But in blockchain, a lot of this is evolutionary, right? So you have the decentralized exchanges, which is going to be sort of 2018. You already know where the big geopolitical sort of changes within the industry are going to happen. These aren't sort of snapshot breaking news. Oh, the price is up, the price is down. There's a new flashy ICO. You know, that's not what anybody wants to read or hear about or examine. You know, they want to know, okay, what type of decentralized exchanges have we got? Is there a difference between AirSwap and Ether Delta? We're not interested if it's first, second, third, fifth. It's fine. What is this impact on the industry? Is this 0x very different from Kyber? Where is the protocols lie? There's a whole evolution before we arrive at true decentralized autonomous organizations, right? So, you know, there is an industry, and that industry has a trajectory, right? And that has an evolutionary course. So, you know, people want to read real information, data, knowledge, and a real repository on where this industry is going, and then what products are coming on top of this industry. So these sort of snapshots and this geopolitics, China said this today and X said Y, and that's just utter noise, right? So when we go out and do our sort of readership, this is just old school mainstream media pumping out the same old, you are all servants of our information, just carry on reading it, price up, price down. You know, that's what we're killing, right? We're about, you know, we're successfully getting rid of this old order, right? And now it's about real infrastructural developments. You know, is there a future in liquid assets? If so, why? Can we fractionalize them? These are real movements that are going to change the way we live, work, and evolve. That's what real stories are about. They're not about the rest of this old way of sort of wanting to just consume more. It's just ridiculous.
I have to really quickly, I have to say something. Like, we have a greater responsibility, and no one is talking about this. And there was a story that came out from CoinFire in 2013 and 2014. And what we're experiencing in the information market, we have a responsibility beyond like everything that we're talking about right now, like the business use cases. Honestly, like all of those are it's very important to know the difference between 0x and AirSwap, but like 0x has their own blog and so does AirSwap, and it's important to know the story behind those two, which is actually really interesting in its own right. There is a story in that in its own right, but what's more important to understand is if you look at the way that media organizations are actually working that are not media organizations, the real power in what is happening in media right now is grassroots psychological insurgency. And it is that there are people going out there paying one person to man 150 Reddit accounts and to go into Reddit with these different accounts and fragment the opinion of the Bitcoin community, to fragment the perspectives of leaders. And they're doing this not only on Reddit, they're doing it on Twitter. What real media is actually doing, it's not presenting you with information that you read like news. Real people that are engaging in media attacks, those people are living inside of your brain where you feel like it's safe. They're talking to you on Twitter. They're adding you on Facebook, like agents adding you on Facebook, pretending to be real people that you might know, making friends with 50 of your friends. They're manning anonymous Reddit accounts. They're going into forums, engaging with people, pretending to be real people. We've seen this from the start of the blockchain industry, but this is something that's happening on a mass level. There was an entire city in the United States that was convinced, using these techniques, that a toxic spill had happened in their city. A piece about this was written in the New York Times, that a toxic spill had happened in their city, when in fact that was never the case. That never happened. Literally an entire city was convinced that a false event happened where they lived from a group of people working in a small box overseas. What we have to think about with our responsibility in media and information, this is not some fanciful, let's do a bunch of unicorn memes and monetize them industry. This is something that's really serious. This is actually a massive political issue, and it's flying under the radar. This might be why Brexit happened. It might be why Donald Trump is our president. No one is taking responsibility for this issue. And everyone sitting in this room and everyone sitting on this panel, we actually have the power to economically overtake the systems that are failing us. I want someone to rise up and do it, because that is our real responsibility, and that's the real threat, and that's the real issue here.
Well, I think it's our responsibility as journalists to fight those lies that are being spread everywhere and so easily now in social media. I think that's our responsibility as storytellers, as journalists, who we have readers that trust us to tell these stories, you know, based on facts and truthfully, and without getting, you know, paid, or without any hidden agenda other than telling people the truth. And I think it's a really good point that you bring up, and it's very important, because it's really undermining our job when there's people out there that are, you know, making readers doubt whether, oh, is this Bloomberg story? Did Tether, you know, pay Bloomberg to write this story? And it's like, it's absurd. Like, Bloomberg would never accept anything like that. But, you know, there's that doubt there, you know?
No, but this ain't born out of some skepticism, right? We've all been subjected to 30 years of homogenized media, right? So, you know, we've lost our patience with mainstream media, right? So this is born, this Trump movement, Brexit, everything's coming out of this kind of homogenized media. You know, how many times on Bloomberg do I hear it criticize Bloomberg himself? Zero, right? So, you know, okay, I'm just a journalist, fantastic. You're not the issue. The issue is those that are managing and controlling the media to push out a certain agenda. It favors San Francisco blockchain companies. That's obvious and apparent to everybody in the industry, right? So in blockchain, we don't have to hide any longer. We don't have an overlord who tells us this is right, this is wrong. We live in a decentralized age. And that's why we joined this movement, right? We didn't join this movement to suddenly become homogenized and sort of start to accept that the traditional media has to start to play a significant part in this. There is a fracture, and that fracture is on purpose, right? So, you know, last week, Bloomberg, you know, about 3 days ago, was pushing out Ether Delta and AirSwap, Ether Delta and AirSwap, right? There's 4 other exchanges that it didn't push out. So, you know, these are selective choices, right? And these are done at a very high editorial level. You know, if you work at News Corp, I've worked at News Corp, you know, you have an agenda, and you feel that agenda. That's why we have a homogenized world. It's not accidental, and there's a lot of freedom. If it was, then why did Bitcoin get such a bad press for 5 years, right?
Look, I think there's room for all types of media. I think if you want to say, you know, mainstream media or the major news organizations have a place in covering cryptocurrencies. I think Bloomberg and other media organizations are doing a good job, or we're doing the best we can at it. And I think there's more specialized publications that have another role to play there. And I mean, from working inside of Bloomberg, I think it's, you know, it's kind of, you can look at it from outside and say, oh, there's a hidden agenda. There's like a puppeteer working all the journalists and like telling them to write stuff. But the stories I write, I investigate, I research, I talk to my sources, and I pitch to my editors. Nobody's telling me what to write.
No, absolutely, but it's much deeper, right? So Bloomberg put in Ripple, right, as it came up on the ticker. And then all of a sudden we've been monitoring, and there's been more mentions of Ripple in Bloomberg, right? So this decisions happen at a much higher level, and that's why you start to see, and then Ripple gets a much bigger coverage.
I think CNBC had a big hand in that one.
Yeah, but I mean, so they
More
all
so
have,
than
I mean, not
Bloomberg.
just Bloomberg, I'm just citing it as an example because it's a financial press service, but generally, and then there's a ripple effect. It gets more coverage in Asia, more people start to invest in it, and it gives it more legitimacy, right? So, you know, we cannot just isolate and say, okay, it's kumbaya, we're going to coexist as two medias, and oh, that's going to be fine, because actually we do want a decentralized media. You know, there is a demand, there is a pull, and it fits very well with the blockchain era.
I see there's a lot of demand for our stories too.
Yeah, there
Okay.
is.
Actually,
There definitely is.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I actually think if you believe a media company has an agenda, maybe I can invite you to look a bit closer into how the pitching process and the work commission works, because I don't know how it works in other companies, but I worked at CNN and BBC. The way it works is different editors have different opinions on a certain piece, and they have to agree to commission you that piece. So it's not like one person has this like overarching power to commission a piece for you. If it's a very commercially driven company, maybe they have an agenda, but sizable companies will not do that, because they know that kind of jeopardizing your integrity is the biggest mistake you can make.
I don't hear many pro-Russian pieces on CNN as of late, right? So if there's no agenda...
So I didn't mention CNN, so yeah.
So if there's no agenda, then why is there such lopsided news? And that's why we need to have decentralized economic models that have the news managed and opened to have a sort of democratic audience, right?
So let's try and keep it as pragmatic as possible. I think none of us would agree that media is perfect right now, and I think what we can do is we can be personally responsible for what we consume, and so that's something that every individual in this room can do, and everyone who contributes to media in any form, centralized or decentralized, can do. One book that I recommend, and I didn't write it, so this is not a plug. Everyone should read a book called The Fourth Turning. And why is because it was written in 1997, but it talks about how over every 80 to 100 years we go through these cycles, and we get to 4 seasons, and basically we're in the crisis season right now, which is winter in the analogy. And what happens during the winter analogy, which they call the crisis, is the institutions that have been built up over the last 80 years crumble, and then the decentralized new regimes form. And when you come to the peak of the crisis, which we're due to hit somewhere between 20 to 25, according to Neil Howe and William Strauss, who wrote this book in 1997, and it'll feel like they wrote it yesterday if you read it. When that happens, what will happen is all 3 generations that are in power, meaning the millennials that are now working in their first or second jobs, and the Gen X's and the Gen Z's that are now in positions of power, and the boomers who are still influencing and sitting on boards, they will all have to come to a point where, although they disagree and they see the world differently, they have to agree on how to move forward, otherwise we will go off of a cliff. And so the good news is this: the last time this happened was April 1945. And what happened was the US had fought genocide by entering World War II, right? And then we killed 3 times as many people with 2 bombs. And this beacon of light, this thing on the hill, we had to get to a point where 2 things happened. Japan took thousands of years of history that said dishonor, or death before dishonor, right? We'll never surrender, we will die, right? We'll do that. They took this paradigm that was ingrained in their culture. And we took this paradigm of we're the good guy. And all of a sudden we had to look at the mirror and go, if we hit the bomb one more time, we're no longer the good guy. And Japan said, if we don't surrender, they're going to hit the bomb. And you had this fundamental global shift for a moment in paradigm reorganization. And then, you know, we entered the rebuild era, and so America and the West benefited from that because, unfortunately, the rest of the world was blown up, and we were the only ones who could rebuild it. We will come to a point, guys, and I don't know what it's going to be, but it will definitely be cyber of some sort. We will come to a point in the next 7 years where we face World War II level, like, again. We're not even there yet. So our job as individuals is to realize we're part of the solution, but whether we want to be or not, we are part of the problem. Yeah. We have to get clear on this is not new. This is every 80 to 100 years this happens. The reason why is because none of us live past 100 years, and we're born during a cycle we don't remember. So read that book and then do something with your company to be part of the solution. But anyway, that's my plug for someone who is dead. But it was a good book. Neil's still alive, but William Strauss is dead.
How are we on time?
Yeah. Should we open for questions? Or?
Yeah, that'd be
it's
good.
up to you. So you rule the auditory, you want these hearts, of course. So you decide. Huh?
I didn't
So it's these 2 questions, right?
Yeah, questions. If you want,
Yes,
if you want to come
please.
up to the mic, there's a mic right here. That'd be great.
Yes.
So,
By the way, if anyone's taking pictures, please
Yeah, I did.
hashtag them so that we can all find them later. Thank you.
All of the awkward ones as well.
Yeah, mostly the awkward ones.
so I'm a YouTuber myself, and I see that I have some influence in people's opinions, especially when I talk about some altcoins. They start to buy it, even that I didn't say buy it. They start to buy it. So the question is, do you think that how the feel of the responsibility you hold on your shoulders, that you know that what you will write or say will influence the market either way?
Yep.
How does that influence your content creation?
I love the question, but I'll just say this. I love that you asked that question, because I instantly want to know what your YouTube channel is, because if nothing else, I know that you're thinking about the unintended consequences of your pursuit of your own effort. Yeah. So I think ask the question. There's not always an answer right away. That's my only, that's my comment.
Actually, this is not an answer to your question, but that's how you're supposed to do your press releases. You're a YouTuber, and I have my own coin. It's always more interesting to cover the human story as opposed to, I have this coin, you can buy it here and there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's my answer to that. Yeah, put a human face to your story.
Yeah. I can tell you, it terrifies me, quite frankly, a little bit, knowing that we went from, our readership went up 900% in the last 12 months. Like, that freaked me out a little, which is awesome. I'm pretty proud of that. But knowing that many page views are happening and that many people are reading, and I had a fat finger moment last week where I tweeted out a wrong price. And oh my gosh, I couldn't get into the account to delete it fast enough, and that thing went bananas. And we issued an apology, and oh my God, people were freaking out. Now, granted, I might have typed the wrong number in the price in the Twitter, but there was a chart and a link with all the right information. It was just that one tiny, and that's all that people saw. But that really brought home how important being right is. And that was a typo, for crying out loud. So our pieces, and this is again why sometimes Bitcoin Magazine isn't the first one with the story, because we want to be right. We want to go back to the source and say, is this actually a fair representation of what you said in your interview? And then we'll read it and then go, ooh, maybe we need to get the other side too. He talks about this other company. We can't put this story out without a response from the guy he's dissing. So we try really, really hard to get it right. If I know that there's a company doing one thing and another company doing something completely different, I like to have them both maybe in the same article and make it a themed article so that our readers can get two different perspectives or two different ideas. And that's really super important to us. We also have like 3 levels of editorial to make sure that what is getting out there is right. We'd rather be late and right than fast and wrong and then have to do a retraction. Like that's my nightmare. So yeah, that responsibility is huge.
Okay, let's do just one more question and we should finalize, okay?
Okay, thank you for the discussion today. It was really insightful. So my question to everyone is, how do you think we can make use of the blockchain technology to solve the problem of fake news? Do you have any insights on that? I think you will have. I would like to hear from you.
Yeah. I mean, this is a broader problem, but I think it starts at the baseline, which is where is our information being created and generated. So the model that I outlined for this, that I've talked about publicly a few times, if anyone wants to build it, help me build it out, that'd be great, because I'm certainly not a developer, but it's called Hero. And the way that I've gone about thinking about this is essentially, and I might be wrong, right, but it's the idea of creating an incentivized uTorrent that has a front face that's essentially GitHub for journalism. Because the way we think about all information needs to be like the information of code, because what we're essentially doing with information is constructing the entire universe. What is code doing? It's kind of constructing our digital universe. It's structuring the brain of a computer. So the idea that, and the reason why it's called Hero is because there's a book by Neil Stephenson called Snow Crash. And in Snow Crash, his original job was delivering pizzas for the mafia. But how he actually made money was that he would dig through screenwriters' trash cans. It's a science fiction book. He'd dig through screenwriters' trash cans, he'd find screenplays, and he'd upload them to this massive database where journalists would pay to download the information and then share it with other people, because that was how the incentive structures were set up. Now, in that model, the information library was actually owned by the former Library of Congress, which I don't think is the right model. But if we can decentralize that, then we effectively have an open source marketplace that can protect the anonymous identities of individuals who want to upload information, while simultaneously allowing people who have verified identities or verified anonymous identities to contribute in an open source way to the construction of a public narrative and we can actually incentivize people from opposing perspectives to come together and find harmony, not only in their belief, but harmony in the very foundation of the way the information is constructed in that story. I think so much of the world works like code, and I'd rather not end up in a science fiction dystopian narrative. So I'm trying to figure out how do we leverage in this world science fiction to create a better reality. So that's my way of solving it. It's through both humanization and security.
Well, full disclosure, I have no position or interest in this company, so I only know about them because I read their white paper, deepsea.io, yeah. C being S-E-E, has a pretty compelling white paper that touches on a lot of the things you've said. Cool. They're a distributed team, but I happen to know them because my co-author is an advisor of their thing and had me take a look at it. I can't say that I know exactly what they're doing, but they're disrupting media in a way that has the right kind of incentives models, is down the path you're thinking. So people that are looking for ways to copy that or do that or kind of innovate on top of that, it might be a good white paper to read and connect with them.
Yeah, and the other thing that I was going to say is that if you want to build this, I'm working on international global sovereignty and human rights for oppressed populations, but this is something I'm really passionate about. It was my first business in the industry, so if this is something that anyone's interested in building and you have the talent and the skill, reach out to me, because I would absolutely love to help, and I'd love to see this take hold in the world. I do have a pretty full plate. But I feel like our other panelists would have some interesting ideas, and I think you would actually have some amazing comments on the content generation and creation side.
Well, in regards to the question about blockchain-based solutions to fight fake news, I'll be honest, I can't think of too much. And it was like I stated earlier, I don't know much in regards to media. But in regards to the YouTube factor, it is very important. So I don't want to jump questions and stuff. But anyways, I think that outside of a blockchain perspective, I don't know of any solutions to that, and the DeepSea thing, I'll definitely try to look into that in regards to what you were discussing earlier. But in regards to media, it's always been a case of integrity, and I will say that even in this system right now, where we're seeing a shift, I think, in power towards individuality in media rather than collective in a sense. So for example, earlier, you were talking about Bloomberg, for example, and how the media process goes. I think that people don't dislike the mainstream media because they're just big giants who obviously want to send out a message of some sort. I don't think that's the case. I want to say more than anything, though, that I think the mainstream media, more than anything, has to work towards making it clear that, for example, in your case, you write your own media, giving them the flexibility and freedom to do so. And I think that's the illusion, is that everyone thinks that you're just controlled under some corporate entity, and that's obviously, I don't think that's always the obligation.
So or you could just press the reset switch and say, right, all media is technically fake and biased, and let's build a reputation index and have a trust network. So whenever you see a news, what reputation index does it have? What trust network does it emerge from? Yes. But obviously, look, I'm presenting a view from the east,
that's what DeepSea's doing. They're building in a reputation like almost Product Hunt meets Quora meets Reddit meets, whatever you were saying, and that's what they're attempting to do, right? Is to come up with a reputation index. So you can publish anything you want, but just like Uber, and there's flaws in that model too, because who wants to give someone who's basically making their living driving around a 2 if you're a human being, even if they give you a shitty ride? So there's flaws in that because we're human beings. Some of us have empathy, but there is a way to do it with reputation.
I mean, the reset switch is the best switch. I mean, we, the oppressed class, are never going to agree with the oppressor, right? So, there's a dichotomy there, right? So, when I go to these deprived communities, it's like, what's this bullshit we're seeing on TV all the time? This is not how it is, right? So, you know, this is not how we're presented. But, you know, to the oppressors who, you know, feel it's great and it's fantastic and it's all sort of Disneyland, it's not going to be agreeable, right? So we're not going to come to an agreement anytime soon, but on the blockchain, we can press the reset switch and use this deep dive and start to have this reputation index and start to build forward, right?